Hello, everyone. Welcome to Shout Out with Sage. I am Sage Stevens, the host on Streaminn HUBB Radio. And today, my guest is a comedian and writer. She has been featured on Netflix as a joke, the Boston International Comedy Festival. She's a finalist in season 6 of the NBC series Last Comic Standing and has her own half-hour comedy special, The Hanoi Honey, on NBC's Peacock Network. As a writer, she is featured in dozens of comedy books like The Complete Idiot's Guide to Jokes and The Comedy Thesaurus and many others. And today I would like to welcome to Shout Out with Sage, Rosie Tran. Hey, Rosie, how are you?
Hey, Sage. Thanks for having me. You look fabulous.
Oh, why, thank you. I tried.
I'm feeling like mermaid vibes.
Okay, well, that's good, I guess. I was by the pool on the weekend, so maybe that's where I'm channeling it from. So well, tell me, how did you start in comedy?
I actually started, I was very, very shy, Sage, believe it or not. And I was dating a guy who wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And I started as a comedy writer for him. I would sit in the back of the comedy club kind of scowling. And whenever he did a joke that didn't work, we'd go home and I'd say, well, why don't you try the joke like this, babe? Or why don't you try the joke like that? And every single time he did it the way I told him, he'd get a laugh. So that was my toe into the performance bug. And then after we broke up, I kind of missed sitting in the back of comedy clubs. So I was like, well, why don't I give it a try? So right. I did. And that's when I fell in love with performing.
With the writing, was that something natural for you? Did people find you funny, when you were out and about, or where did you get that natural ability from?
Yeah, so I think I had a natural ability to make people laugh. I was really shy growing up, and most comedians actually are, and a lot of performers are very shy. Beyonce says she's shy, and people are like, Beyonce. But when she goes on stage, she has the alternate personality, right? Her Sasha Fierce personality. So I think that when you're shy, you're very observant of the world around you. Mm-hmm. I'm also the daughter of immigrants, so I was an outsider. And I think that when you're an outsider, when you feel different, you kind of have to have a good sense of humor to make fun of being different. And so all of the things that happened to me growing up as a child that I saw as a negative actually was a positive to who I am now, because adversity creates creativity. And me and my sisters were always laughing. Me and my family were always laughing. My dad had a great sense of humor. So I think that's where it came from.
And what type of adversity, that did you have to overcome?
I think just being different, being the child of immigrants, growing up in Louisiana, which I grew up in New Orleans, which is a really diverse city. So I was really lucky with that. But, we were in the suburbs. I definitely did not feel part of the mainstream culture. And having parents that, didn't speak English very well and were outsiders. I think now with all the inclusion that's happening in Hollywood and internationally, it feels very natural. And it's kind of like, well, what do you mean being different? But back in the 80s and 90s, it was like I was not considered mainstream at all.
I understand where you're coming from. So were you born here, though, in the U.S.?
I was, yeah. I was born in New Orleans. Okay. My parents are immigrants, so I'm first generation.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that, just to understand, because it's definitely different if you had to learn English and overcome all that. But that's a totally different thing. What about, when did you start performing?
I started performing in college, basically right out of high school. It was actually my high school sweetheart that wanted to be a comedian. So I got in really early. And I think actually I was really blessed because I did not know anything about stand-up comedy. And the reason I say that that's a blessing is because I noticed that when I started comedy, a lot of new comedians are very derivative. So if they watched, Robin Williams growing up, then their stand-up style is usually very similar to Robin Williams. Or if they, are a fan of Dane Cook, then their style is very similar to Dane Cook. And because I grew up in a household where I didn't even know what stand-up comedy was, my family didn't really watch anything like that. I wasn't really allowed to watch stuff like that. I was able to come up with an authentic voice that was just me. And usually that takes a comedian over 10 plus years to develop, because you're finding your voice while you're watching others. And it's really, really common when you see new comics, you know, you can tell immediately, oh, this guy's a fan of Richard Pryor, or this guy's a fan of Chris Rock, because it's very, very derivative. And so I really was blessed because I had no clue what I was doing. And I was just writing things that were funny to me.
Right,
So
right.
even though some people might see it as a handicap that I didn't have that stand-up background, I consider it a strength because I really was able to say, hey, what's funny to Rosie? And write that. And so even though I'm not, you know, super unique as far as being an eccentric style of stand-up, I think my voice is very unique to me.
Right. It's your own view of the world and what your observations are and your opinions of that. So yeah, it's like, I know, yeah, when you watch something on TV, it can influence what you do. So I see how that could affect some comedians as well. Definitely.
Yeah.
When did you perform for your very first time?
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
My very first performance was when I was a teenager, and it was actually, I was still with my boyfriend at the time, and he was like, well, why don't you try to do some stand up, because you're always at my shows. And he kind of made fun of me. He's like, you're always scowling in the back and you're frowning and you just look so unhappy. And if you write some material for yourself, you'll have something to talk to the other comedians about. So it was more of him just trying to encourage me to be more social, because I was very antisocial. Like I said, I was very shy. And so I started thinking in my mind, well, what would I talk about if I was a comedian? So I started coming up with a few minutes. And like I've mentioned several times already on your show, I was painfully, painfully shy, to the point where if I would go up to a counter and ask for a napkin, you know, at the food court at the mall, I was like, would turn bright red. And I was so scared to even talk to, you know, the cashier. But for some reason, when I performed on stage, and I've heard a lot of performers that are shy say this, I felt completely comfortable. I felt completely authentic. And so there was something about stepping on that stage that put me in an alternate space. And I've heard that a lot from actors that, you know, do live theater. Like, oh, once I got on stage and started singing, or once I got on stage and started performing, I felt like I was a different person. And that's what happened for me. The second I stepped on stage, even though it was just an open mic comedy night and it wasn't the most supportive environment, I immediately felt at ease. And a couple of the jokes that I had written worked. You know, some of them didn't. Usually you're not funny right away. But a couple of the jokes that I wrote kind of worked and got a laugh. And I was like, oh, I think this is actually what I was meant to do.
Right. Did you have to work on your timing, like, you know, and how to land jokes, or did you take classes in that?
Yeah, so everyone has to, I think, work on their timing. I did have to, but I did have a natural rhythm. And I think it came from inadvertently watching a lot of comedy movies growing up. So me and my sister were huge fans of comedy film, not stand up, but just comedy films, which is comedy writing. And we would watch everything, you know, from Beavis and Butthead to SNL. And so I did, I think, have some sort of innate timing subconsciously in the back of my mind. But of course, yeah, I had to work on it, and I still work on it. And, you know, there's a documentary with Jerry Seinfeld called Comedian, where he's coming back to stand up after Seinfeld show is, you know, retired, and he's working on his timing. So I think it's just something that constantly needs to be worked on, because sometimes something's a funny idea, but the way you say it matters. So you have to say it in front of an audience.
Right.
Many, many
Also,
times.
yeah. Also, does the energy of the audience play into that? Like, so you have your own timing, but then do you feed off of the audience?
You do. And so so whenever I have a bad show, I actually get really upset, not because I had a bad show, because I've been doing it so long now, I don't care, but because I'm doing stand up now for me. I've done it so many years, I don't really need validation. I do it for me. And so if the audience is a little off, like they're not paying attention, or they're on their phones or whatever, or it's not a good crowd, it actually does mess with your timing. And so comedy is one of the only art forms where you are practicing in real time and failing in front of people. Singing, you can sing, you know, and practice many times privately, but comedy, you actually need the audience. It's a conversation. You need that laughter to show where your laugh should be, or your punchline should be. So that's why I kind of don't like, sometimes comedians have been getting canceled a lot, or they're getting filmed on iPhones and people are putting it up and saying, oh, well, this comic's not funny. And I don't really like that because we're still practicing. Even Jerry Seinfeld's practicing. We go to the comedy clubs to practice and to get it perfect for our special or for our big show. And so when people record you kind of without your consent, you know, from an iPhone or post online and say, well, this person is being offensive. Sometimes we don't know it's offensive. And I know that's hard for people to understand. Say, well, how can you not know something is offensive? Well, we're practicing our stand-up. And we need that audience interaction to know if it's offensive or to know where it goes. Because sometimes something's funny in your mind and it's like not that funny to other people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've all said things that we thought were like, you know, brilliant or funny or whatever, and then other people are looking at you. Yeah, that wasn't so good.
That wasn't that funny, or that wasn't appropriate. And so we actually need the audience. It's a conversation. And so I really don't like. I'm okay with someone, you know, getting canceled if they're being really hateful and offensive. But when comics are being canceled for what they say, I actually don't like that because we need to work it out to see if it's funny. And so I think it's kind of taken out of context, and it's really hard for someone who's a non-entertainer to understand that sometimes.
Yeah. But I also think comedians, I think part of the job of being a comedian is commenting on society and making those observations. And maybe not everyone will agree with you, or you'll be coming from a different standpoint. But then again, there is a fine line between, you know, the hate speech and all that. Like it is, you know, it's just hard to, you know, walk that line, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is hard to walk that line with everything. And also the mood can change. I think that right now a lot of people are hyper aware. I've been doing stand-up for 20 years. I've never in my 20 years of stand-up been considered an offensive comic by any stretch of the imagination. And I think in the past 2 years since we've been coming out of COVID, people are still nervous to laugh at things, or the world has just changed so much that I think that people are getting used to live performance again.
Right. We've all been, you know, shuttered in and not used to being around other people and having that interaction. Do you have an agent or a manager? Like I know you have a comedy special. How did all that come about for you?
I do have an agent and a manager. My comedy special actually came about through just being in the industry for so many years. I had been on a podcast with another comedian who was a good friend of mine. He's pretty established. He's been in the industry for probably 25 years and has several specials in Comedy Central. And the podcast that we did together, one of the producers of that podcast produced my special. So I would say it's from connections, but I would also say that those connections were hard earned because I've been in the industry for so long, working so hard. So.
Right. Speaking of that, so networking is really important for a comedian, just in general.
I think networking is really important in the entertainment industry. It's really hard because when you first move to Hollywood, people say, well, it's all who you know. It's all who you know. And then you're scratching your head because like 80% of the people you meet are in the industry. So you're like, I know all these people in the industry, right? Like everyone I know is in the industry almost. It's like no one's helping me what's going on. But I would say that it does matter who you know, but it also matters what you're working on, and timing is really important. I've gotten acting gigs and movies and other things because someone thought of me, but it's also availability. You know, I just produced a film. I think you and I talked about that when we met, and we had some actors fall out, and literally people got cast because they fit the description and they were available the next day. And it sounds crazy that would be the requirement, but you would be surprised how many people were not available. You know, our casting department called so many actors last minute, and so many people just were not available. And so now there's people that are in a, you know, feature film. It's an independent film with, you know, Bai Ling, who's an international star, a big star in China, and has been in Oscar-nominated films. She's our star because they were just available, and they knew us, and they knew casting, and they knew the producers. And we definitely called people that were talented. It wasn't like we called any random person off the street. but they got cast because they were available.
Hey, you're walking. Come here.
Yeah. But sometimes that can happen.
Right.
That actually can happen. And that is just sheer luck. But I mean, the people that we did call were people that we knew that were talented, and they happened to be available. So I think that is how networking is important. It's not as direct as you would think. You know, there's so many things that I've gotten or things that I've helped others with that it just knowing them for years and years and knowing that they're talented.
Right. That's happened to me as well. Like I've, known someone for many years, and then all of a sudden, I texted them to say hi, and then a couple days later they text me, "Hey, we need someone. Are you available?" "Yeah, I'm available." "Okay, here you go." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. So, and I know it's frustrating for outsiders. Like, how did you get that? But it's just, I'm a big fan of, Naval Ravikant. He's a venture capital guy, but he also does a lot of philosophy stuff on Twitter and online. And one thing he says that everything in life is compound interest, and it's not just money, it's relationships. So you might know someone, and then that relationship compounds over years and years and years. And of course they're going to trust you when they, of course they're going to trust Sage. Hey, I've known Sage for 10 years and I know she can deliver, and I know she's not going to show up on set drunk and crazy and screaming and
Really?
whatever.
Darn it.
And so that's the most important thing, because we had actors for our film show up late or show up unprofessional. And so you would think this is such a big opportunity for so many people. Why wouldn't they take it serious? But a lot of people don't. And so,
well, they also self-sabotage, or, everyone has their own stuff going on. So it might not. And then some people just are irresponsible, but.
So yeah, so I think life is that compound interest of relationships, and it compounds over time where, hey, I've worked with Sage before. I know she's trustworthy. I know she'll get it done. She's professional, whatever. And professionalism is actually the most important thing, because talent is not as much. And I've been in a casting session with other actresses that are so insanely beautiful and so insanely talented that I should just pack up my bags and go home. But some of them are still not around, because it's a game of tenacity, and it's a game of there's all sorts of things involved.
Right. So speaking of tenacity, like, do you feel like grit and just, getting up there every day and just, having a goal in mind, has that helped? Like, that's what it's taken you to get this far?
Yeah. So I think tenacity and also blind ignorance. And what I mean by that is, when I started, now there's quite a bit. I think I met you at an Asian American comedy benefit.
Yeah.
So there's quite a bit of Asian Americans, and there's quite a bit of women. But even when I started, 20 years ago, there was not as many women and there was not as many Asian Americans. And it definitely was a boys' club, a white male boys' club, which is a lot of Hollywood. And I didn't know that I couldn't do it. I really think that is a lot of young naivete and just ignorance. I just kept going, not because I was so driven, but because I really had no one telling me. I mean, I had people telling me no, but I was just so naively optimistic. And I think that actually was a benefit to me, because I know so many people that have quit Comedy Sense or quit the entertainment industry because they got discouraged. And I think that had I had a little bit more tenacity and a little bit more grit and understanding of the industry, I actually would be a lot more successful. But what I did have going for me was a blind ignorance and a little bit of delusion. And I think some people, will come to Hollywood and people are like, oh, they're delusional, they're not talented at all. But I never discount those people, because I think in the beginning, you have to be a little bit delusional. You're leaving your house and home and family and friends.
I think a little bit of delusion.
A little bit is good.
You wouldn't be here if you weren't a little,
I think a little bit of delusion, a little bit of ignorance served me. And I think actually that's good for many people, because to leave your house and home, to leave your family and friends and go follow a dream, you need that little bit of delusion. And I think it's good. I think it's too much delusion where that's not good.
Again, another fine line.
Another fine line, right?
Another fine line to walk, definitely. What are you working on now? And let us know where we can find it.
Yeah, so right now I'm just working on my first feature film that I produced and co-produced and co-wrote, which I told you about when we met. And it's a horror comedy called House of Karma. And hopefully it will be on the streaming networks. We're in talks right now, which I cannot discuss. But it's starring international star Bai Ling. And we have a TikTok star, Nila Jolene, who is the lead. And she's absolutely amazing. She's 16 years old and she's going to be a star. She's really, really fun and a great actress. It's a teen comedy, romance, horror, and it's super fun. So we're in post production right now, and like I said, we're in talks to have it released. I don't think it's going to be a theatrical release, but it may be on streaming. So it's called House of Karma, and it was super fun, super positive experience, and I'm really excited about that. And of course, people can check out my comedy special, The Hanoi Honey, on NBC Peacock, or if you go on my Instagram, Out of the Box Rosie, or Twitter at Funny Rosie, then I have a link tree with all of my links.
Great. Let's go back to the movie. So who wrote the movie?
So the movie was co-written by myself and my director, Rebecca Cochin, and Dante Riscielli, and my husband, Andrew, who is also my producing partner. We all wrote it together. We came up with the idea, and it's just a really fun movie, horror comedy.
How is writing with a team like that? Like, usually most people I usually like just huddle over in a corner somewhere by myself. But what's it like writing with a group of people?
It was really fun. It was my first time doing something like that, actually my second time. And it was really collaborative. We even had a read through, and we had some actors that some of them ended up being cast as leads in the movie, and some of them just were read through actors and run through actors, excuse me. And we did the run through and read it out loud to see if the jokes worked. And then we punched up and took suggestions from all the actors. Hey, what do you feel about this? What do you feel about that? So it was really collaborative. And I think that was one of the best parts about it. I normally actually don't like collaborating with people. I was the kid in school that when we had a group project, I would be like, can I work by myself? But when you're working with a really fun team, it can be really fun. So I think that just from the beginning, it was just a great experience.
When it comes to casting, was it really important for people to be comedians or actors, or at least just be funny? Like, can actors learn to land the jokes? Like, can you guide them, or do they sort of need to have that sensibility to begin with?
So I'm going to answer your question, but in a roundabout way. So the most important thing, believe it or not, Sage, believe it or not, is being professional. So we had so much casting where people would submit for the casting and they wouldn't submit the clip that we asked them to submit, or they wouldn't submit the correct. It was just really bizarre. Like, I had a girlfriend, I'm not going to name and embarrass her, but she submitted, she's a friend of mine, she's a comedian. I totally would have cast her in the project, but she didn't submit the sides. So she didn't read the sides, even though in the casting we said, submit a tape of you reading these sides. So and things were moving so fast, and we have investors and other people that we're beholden to. So we just had to move on. So here's someone who has a foot in the door. She's someone I personally know and like, and we would have cast her. We would have cast her for the part. All she had to do was read the lines, and she did not do that. So I was surprised by the level of unprofessionalism. Even though we put out a professional casting and breakdowns, even though we had people submitting through their agents and managers, I would say about 50% of our submissions were complete trash because people just did not do the very basic. So that was a shocker to me as a struggling actress in Hollywood and a comedian who has auditioned for many things. Your foot is in the door if you just do the basic job, which was insane. So that was that, to answer your question about casting. But I think people needed to have a little bit of comedic timing. Our comedic lead is an improv and comedic actress, but I don't think it's necessary. I do think people can learn it, but I would recommend taking a basic comedic acting class if you're not familiar with comedic acting, because there is some timing to it.
Right. Where do you see yourself, like, in 5 years? Where will we see Rosie Tran?
I hope to have my second special out. I'm already working on it. I thought that my first special, it took me 20 years to record it. And I thought, it's going to take me another 20 years to record a second one. But after I recorded my first special, it was like a release, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that material, once it was out of my head, all this new material came in, which was really shocking to me. I thought it was going to take me forever to write another special, but I'm coming up with new jokes almost every day. So I think the storage needed to be cleared out.
You need to make room for new files.
Exactly. And so I think I will have a new special in the next year or two. And then hopefully, I loved producing, so hopefully I will be trying to produce a film once a year.
What advice or tips would you give to someone starting out as a comic?
I would say to take a comedy class. I know a lot of comedians are against comedy classes, but I would say do not be attached to that comedy class. So the issue with comedy classes is a lot of people take them and then they're stuck in the comedy class world forever. And that's just not like a viable way to become a professional comedian. So I think comedy classes are really good to step into the shallow end of the swimming pool, if that makes any sense, but you eventually have to go swim. So
Right.
I would take a comedy class for sure, but then I would step away from that and just go to open mics and go and hang out at the Improv, hang out at the Comedy Store, sit in the back, watch professional comics, network, try to get professional shows booked. But I would for sure take a comedy class. I think it's a really, really great way to dip your toe into the pool. And I think the reason a lot of comedians are against comedy classes is because a lot of people that take them end up just using them as floaties and never going into the deep end.
I see. They don't take that next step to actually get up on a stage at a comedy club, right?
Correct. Or they'll end up in what I call open mic, purgatory, where they're just doing open mics all the time and that's all they're doing. You have to leave that circle and like I tell people, never say you're an aspiring comedian. You're a comedian. Never say you're an aspiring actress. You're an actress. Well, I haven't really done anything. Well, if you keep saying I'm aspiring, you'll never do something. So say I'm an actress, get in some student films, say you're a comedian, try to get some shows booked and move towards that goal every day, move towards that goal. Right. You have a little bit of delusion.
Right. No. Some of my friends still call me aspiring and go, I've been paid. So if I got paid for acting, I'm an actor. I got paid. Someone actually paid me.
If you've been paid, you're an actor. If you've performed, even if you've performed you for free and it's something that's been on tape, you're an actor. I don't believe it's like being pregnant. You're pregnant or you're not. You can't be half pregnant. So I don't believe in the aspiring. I think that is a kind of a
I totally agree with you. Yes. Yeah. Totally agree with you on that. Where can we find you on social media?
So I'm on Instagram at Out of the Box Rosie, and that's because I have a podcast called Out of the Box Podcast with Rosie Tran. And then I'm on Twitter and Facebook at Funny Rosie, and I'm not on TikTok or any of those other platforms. There's too many platforms.
Yeah, you can't do it all. You can't do it all. And do you have any shout outs before we go? Has there anyone that's been really instrumental in helping you achieve the success you have?
I would like to shout out to all of the amazing female stand-up comedians, Joan Rivers, Caroline Rhea, and all those women before me, Margaret Cho, Lisa Lampanelli, because as tough as I had it when I started on the scene 20 years ago, they started 30, 40 years ago, Joan Rivers, rest in peace, 50 years ago, when people didn't even want to hear women talking and they thought that it was disgusting and foul for women to tell a joke on stage. So them for sure. And then obviously my husband, who is my rock and my support and has supported me through my comedy career through many ups and downs. And my producing partner who helped me produce the film. So he's an amazing person.
Cool. Very good. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on Shout Out with Sage today. I appreciate it. And I'm sure I'll see you at a comedy show soon somewhere. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Streaminn HUBB Radio. I'm Sage Stevens. Thank you. See you next Wednesday at 4. Thanks, Rosie. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Sage.
Cool. Okay. Bye-bye.